Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, August the 23rd, 2022 at 6 o'clock p.m. I'd like to call the meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. Madam Clerk, the council mics are open. Please call the roll.
Mayor Ali. Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Sear. Councilmember Graham. Councilmember Jackson. Councilmember Jensen. Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach. Councilmember Ruckriegel. Councilmember Velpula.
Present.
We have a quorum present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everyone in our City Council audience as well as our listening audience at WCBU. I'd also like to welcome the audience watching via Cable 22. Please join me, everyone, and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk?
We have two proclamations.
Okay. The first proclamation celebrates National Library Card Sign-Up Month. With us is Mr. Randall Yelverton, the Executive Director of Peoria Public Library, and Doug Roths, the General Manager of CityLink. Welcome, gentlemen. And the proclamation reads, whereas September has been recognized as National Library Card Sign-Up Month by the American Library Association since 1987, and Peoria Public Library has endeavored to reach all Peorians with this most valuable resource, providing free access to its multi-million-dollar collection. And whereas Peoria Public Library adopted a fine-free policy for all in September 2020 on International Literacy Day to remove all barriers to the library's collections of books, magazines, movies, music, research databases, and extensive local history archives and genealogy information. And whereas CityLink, the Greater Peoria Mass Transit District, is also a crucial community resource, making transportation accessible to all and providing more than 1.5 million passenger trips in fiscal year 2022. And whereas CityLink and Peoria Public Library have joined together to offer free CityLink bus rides throughout the month of September for all who display a library card. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, Illinois, do hereby acknowledge September 2022 as National Library Card Sign-Up Month and Fine-Free and Fare-Free Month. That wasn't easy to say. Okay. I love the partnership, gentlemen.
Well, thank you to Mayor Ali and the City Council for your ongoing support and your ongoing support of Peoria Public Library, and for giving us a few moments to share some great news. And thank you to Doug Rolfs, CityLink's General Manager, the CityLink Board, and the entire staff for offering such a generous incentive to our community. As the Mayor mentioned, September is always National Library Card Sign-Up Month, and this September is Peoria Public Library's second anniversary of being fine-free. When we approached CityLink asking if they would like to take part in a fine-free plus fare-free promotion, they, like any great community organization, immediately jumped on board. The fact that they then expanded this gift to include the other libraries in their service area, Peoria Heights, Pekin, and East Peoria's Fond du Lac Library, is a testament to how collaborative and generous and wonderful our community is. And speaking of wonderful, I wanted to quickly remind everyone of all the wonderful benefits your library card gives you. With your library card, you have free access to our multi-million-dollar collection of books, movies, magazines, music, research, and genealogy materials. Our collection covers all genres, all ages, and it's constantly being updated with the latest materials. Everything we have is yours and can be enjoyed without the fear of racking up library fines. We subscribe to hundreds of magazines, so you don't have to, from Consumer Reports to Sports Illustrated, and many of them you can flip through digitally from the comfort of your own home. You can check out a free family pass to the Peoria Riverfront Museum. Come see local bands for free at our monthly Music in the McKenzie concert series at our North Branch. And you can dabble in the arts, learn chess, get online tutoring, or take one of the great courses for free. Maybe you just want to watch a movie on one of our big screens or come to a book club to make new friends. Or maybe you need a space to build your online business. You can use our public computers, Wi-Fi, and meeting spaces, all for free. I could go on and on. There's just one thing more that you need to know about Peoria Public Library. We're here for everyone. If you don't have a library card, come see us this month and be sure to take part in this wonderful promotion. Thank you all again for your support.
Thank you. Mr. Rolfs?
Thank you, Mayor Ali and City Council. I'd just like to also thank the library for this opportunity. We're always looking for public or private partnerships and opportunities to use our service around the town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is one of the greatest assets in our community. Do we have a council liaison to the library? Is it you, Councilman? Anything you want to add?
Well, I think you summed it up very well, saying that this is one of the greatest assets to our community. I think you can judge any community by the access that it gives to its community by its library, and I think that we have got one of the best around. I know it's one of the jewels in the Illinois system, and I think it goes without saying that several years ago, when it was up to be able to lift up each one of the library systems and add a new one in as well, that was all done across the city at one time. And I think that says really to the heart of what the community thinks about our library system. We're proud of it each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I've got another proclamation here. We also have Chamber of Commerce Week, and with us is the President and CEO of our Peoria Area Chamber of Commerce and CEO Council, Joshua Gunn, accompanied by the Vice President of Operations of the Peoria Area Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Audrey Cam. Thank you both for being here. Our proclamation reads, whereas the Peoria Area Chamber of Commerce works with the businesses, merchants, and industry to advance the civic, economic, and industrial, professional, and cultural life of the city of Peoria. And whereas the Chambers of Commerce have contributed to the civic and economic life of Illinois for 184 years since the founding of the Galena Chamber of Commerce in 1838. And whereas the Chamber of Commerce and its members provide community members with a strong business environment that increases employment, retail trade, and commerce, and industry to make the city of Peoria a better place to live. And whereas the Chamber of Commerce encourages the expansion of existing industry services and commercial firms and encourages new firms and individuals to locate in the city of Peoria. And whereas the state of Illinois is the home to international chambers of commerce and more than 400 local chambers of commerce. Whereas this year marks the 103rd anniversary of the founding of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, the state's leading broad-based business organization. And whereas this year marks the 107th anniversary of the Illinois Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, a professional development organization for the Chamber of Commerce professionals. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, Illinois, do hereby proclaim September 11th through September 17th, 2022 as Chamber of Commerce Week in Peoria, Illinois. Mr. Gunn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, members of the City Council, and thank you, Peoria, for this proclamation. We proudly accept this proclamation and are honored to represent our over 850 members and 60,000 employees across the region here who really make up the lifeblood of our economy. And so we couldn't be more proud to continue to serve the Peoria area and the greater region as we have done for over 112 years actually at the Peoria Area Chamber of Commerce. Proud to stand here with Audrey Cam, our Vice President of Operations, and continue to advocate for an environment that's good for business, which we believe is good for all of us. The economy builds, a strong economy provides a strong community for strong resources that enable us to do all the things that we've dreamed of doing, and the business community is a vital component to doing that. So we are grateful for the proclamation and honored to be here amongst all of you other great leaders in the Peoria area.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gunn, can we get a brief update from you or Ms. Kim on the Big Table event that's coming up?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we hosted our press conference this morning for the Big Table, which, if you all recall, we launched in 2019 as an effort to break down some of the silos and build an environment for great regional collaboration. The Big Table is centered around having what some might describe as difficult conversations around issues that are impacting our community, with the hopes that we can develop action steps to address some of those key issues. So, for instance, the first Big Table was the impetus of something called the Regional Workforce Alliance. We heard that there was a workforce shortage, and we know that many of our businesses continue to wrestle with the challenges of finding workers and finding employees for their businesses. So Regional Workforce Alliance was one thing that was born out of the Big Table. Another initiative called the Black Leadership Initiative was born out of conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion at the Big Table. We often talk also about building regional pride and attracting people here to Peoria. And our GP 2030 Talent Attraction Initiative was born out of conversations at the Big Table. So the Big Table is back and in person in 2022. And we look forward to talking about the other issues that our community faces now that we've made our way through the challenges of the pandemic. What's next? What's on the horizon? What other issues can we work together to solve? And one of the key components of the Big Table that I'll stress for the folks in this room is we want people who don't typically engage in these conversations to be there. We want people who maybe have never been to a Chamber of Commerce event or a council meeting, who don't feel like their voice matters or their voice is heard, to come in those rooms and have those conversations with city leaders and regional leaders so that we can solve some of the key challenges and continue to make this great region even better. So I look forward to seeing you all there October 20th. Sorry, that's why I have Audrey here to help me keep me straight. October 20th, it's a full day event at the Peoria Civic Center. We also, for the first time, have a keynote speaker for this year's Big Table. We're bringing in Bob Ross, not the painter from PBS, but another Bob Ross from the Greater Topeka Partnership, to talk to us about the success that they've had in Topeka, Kansas, around talent attraction. So they've really built the gold standard on attracting people to a community that's not all that different from Peoria, right? It's a medium-sized Midwestern city with a riverfront and a strong industrial manufacturing economy and a center of government as well. And so we look forward to learning from Bob Ross. That will happen over the lunch hour. But we'll also talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, innovation and entrepreneurship, quality of life and place, and workforce and education. So all the pieces of the work that we do at the Chamber and the work that, honestly, everyone in this room does to make this region great will be on the table at the Big Table, and we invite you to bring your energy, your passion, and most importantly, bring a friend. Bring someone who has never been to an event like this so we can truly have a diverse, open, inclusive, and Big Table.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor.
Madam Clerk?
We are at the minutes.
Councilman Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move to approve the minutes of the joint City Council and Town Board meeting held on August 9th and the special City Council meeting held on August 16th, 2022 as printed.
Seconded by Councilmember Allen. Any discussion? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at the consent agenda. 22-286 is a communication from the Mayor and Interim Corporation Council with a request to approve the declaration of local state of emergency. 22-287 is a communication with a request to approve and authorize the city manager to execute the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Peoria and the International Association of Firefighters Local 50, covering the period from January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2025. 22-288 is a communication with a request to approve and enter into a professional services contract with Jacob & Klein Ltd. And the Economic Development Group Ltd. In the amount of $42,570 plus reimbursable costs for consulting services related to establishing a tax increment financing district bounded by Illinois Route 6, Radnor Road, Willow Knolls Road, and Allen Road. 22-289 is a communication with a request to approve an intergovernmental agreement with the County of Peoria for traffic control devices, pavement markings, and street striping. 22-290 is a communication with a request to approve and authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation in the amount of $20,018 plus contingencies for the city's participation in D4 ITS System 2023. And on your desk, there is a handout with an updated communication. 22-291 is a communication with a request to approve and authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Illinois Department of Transportation in the amount of $19,696 plus contingencies for the city's participation in D4 ITS System 2023-1. And 22-292 is a communication with a request to concur with the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance amending an existing special use in a Class C2 large-scale commercial district to allow for a 300-square-foot wall sign for the property located at 4100 West Willow Knolls Drive, commonly known as Willow Knolls Shopping Center. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any items to remove from consent? If not, Councilman Euler?
22-287.
Okay. Any other items? Can I get a motion to approve consent moved by Councilmember Sears, seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel? Any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-287 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Human Resources with a request to approve and authorize the City Manager to execute the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Peoria and the International Association of Firefighters Local 50, covering the period from January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2025.
Councilman Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Not that this surprises anyone, including the fire union, but I pulled this off to vote no, as I do with all union contracts, because I firmly believe that until our employees live in our community and the city of Peoria, it has a negative effect on our neighborhoods. And I appreciate the fact that while better than some, the fire union has worked with the city to ensure some amount of residency. Until we have all residency in the city, I can't support contracts. Thank you.
You're welcome. Can I get a motion to approve item 22-287, moved by Councilmember Jackson, seconded by Councilmember Graham? Any, Councilmember Graham?
No, I do not second it,
Oh, okay.
but I would
I'm
like to
sorry,
comment
before you go
on
on, there was a second by Councilmember Riggenbach. Go ahead, Mr. Graham, Councilman Graham.
it. I would like our Corporation Council to provide a history of the residence requirement as relates to the city of Peoria, which would easily go back 25 years, and that famous appellate court case, so we all understand the pages that have already been written and why it is we have situations where we're not able to compel our police or firefighters to reside in the city of Peoria. Years ago, probably 30 years ago, the PEA, which was the precursor for our PFT, Peoria Federation of Teachers, Peoria Education Association was the predecessor union. They tried to, the school board back then tried to compel residency of all employees of Peoria Public Schools District 150. This goes back to the Harry Whitaker era. And again, we were stymied, they were stymied in their effort to do that. So, lest anybody think that we would not like to see everyone living in the city of Peoria who works for the city of Peoria, let everyone know why it is we are where we are and why we can't compel it. And I don't know how we lobby the courts. I mean, I don't see how that happens. Maybe there would have to be yet another case decided on different grounds, but I do think we need a history lesson from our legal department on this very topic.
Thank you, Councilman. I hope there's no expectation that I give the whole history lesson off the top of my head this evening, but from memory, I believe that several contracts ago, there was a grievance that arose out of one of the police contracts having to do with residency, which ultimately resulted in a decision that disfavored residency for our police union. That has somewhat been applied to all of our other union contracts. Now, Councilman Euler recognized that our fire contract does have more residency requirement in it than others, that firefighters are required to live inside the city for the first 10 years of their employment. However, after that, they are free to then move outside those city boundaries. Recently, with some changes to the Illinois Labor Relations Act and as also part of the police reform bill, there was a question about whether or not residency was required or should be required to be bargained as part of any contract negotiations with the unions. However, unfortunately, the bill wasn't written with a lot of clarity, and it really just says it should be discussed. It's not clear if the residency requirements, for example, that we already have with fire, would substantiate that. It didn't say everybody had to live inside the municipalities in which they serve. It just said it had to be discussed, and in this case, it was decided quite some time ago.
Because I remember the night what many consider to be an adverse opinion was handed down, we went into the executive conference room across the hallway, and I believe all 11 of the council members were extremely upset and agitated about it. And there was discussion about outsourcing the Peoria Police Department during that particular executive session. And so this has an interesting history. It would appear to me that the firefighters have agreed to do a great deal more than the police. However, right now, I will say just on a pragmatic basis, and I know this won't necessarily mollify those people on the other side of the question. Right now, one of the things that may help us get our staffing up with the Peoria Police Department would be the ability to do lateral hiring, bringing people in from other communities or hiring them when they live in other communities but within the radius that's required. And right now, we're doing everything we can to get that police staffing level up to deal with the problems that afflict our city. I completely and totally agree with the sentiment of Councilor Euler, but I just think we have to be cognizant of what the history is on this.
Thank you, Councilman. We've got a motion and a second to approve item 22-287. If there's no other discussion, please cast your ballots. Motion passes with 1 nay. Euler. Madam Clerk.
We are at first readings. 22-293 is a communication from the City Manager and Interim Corporation Counsel with a request to receive and file a first reading of an ordinance amending Article 19, Operation of a Cannabis Business of Chapter 18 of the Code of the City of Peoria related to licenses and miscellaneous business regulations.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to turn the floor over to our interim corporation counsel to discuss this item.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a bit of a history lesson, in 2019, this council spent a substantial amount of time holding public hearings and going through a process to establish an ordinance that would allow recreational cannabis to be sold inside the city, so that when the January 1st, 2020 deadline hit, we were prepared for that to occur. We've obviously had quite a bit that's occurred in Illinois since then, involving the opening of various cannabis-related businesses. And recently, Councilman Allen asked me to spend some time looking into some issues that involved some of the social equity applicants. So as a little bit of background, the state gives a very specific definition for when somebody or an entity qualifies as a social equity applicant. I've listed those out in the council communication, but generally they have to live in a disproportionately impacted area for 5 of the last 10 years, have been arrested or convicted of a cannabis-related offense that's eligible for expungement, or have a family member that's been arrested or convicted of a cannabis-related offense that's eligible for expungement, or have more than 10 full-time employees that generally meet those same criteria. Now, what we know about social equity applicants from the state licensing scheme is that they are eligible to pay a reduced application fee, that they're eligible for certain grants and loans through DCEO, and most importantly, from sort of a zoning and siting perspective, is that they are not bound by the restriction that a cannabis dispensary cannot locate within 1,500 feet of another cannabis dispensary. But something that we noticed that occurred in the last couple years that's rather unique to the cannabis industry is once an applicant obtained a license from the state, when they were ready to sell or transfer that license, they weren't going through sort of the normal corporate process of selling off all their assets. They were keeping the license in the original entity's name and using a membership purchase agreement to sell off the financial interest in the company so that the applicants could stay in the original name. Now, even with those criteria, we have some concern that a social equity applicant could originally be cited, perhaps have their membership interest sold off to another corporation or another set of individuals, and therefore end up having 2 businesses located within 1,500 feet that wasn't originally the intent of what the state passed. I can tell you this is a concern across the state. Cities such as Chicago have also been putting in place some language for social equity applicants because that program has been legally challenged from the very beginning when the original lottery for those licenses was supposed to be held. It went so far as to have a Cook County judge has actually had the licenses on halt until just recently. And as of last week, the governor and the Department of Finance and Professional Regulation were able to issue 177 out of the 185 social equity licenses. We know that 7 of those have been issued for the Peoria BLS region, so that includes other counties, not just Peoria. So there's a good chance that we think that at least one of those will end up looking for locations inside the city. But we also want to make sure that we help protect the intent of the statute. So therefore, we added a definition of social equity applicant to our original licensing ordinance. We also made it clear that the dispensing organizations cannot be located within 1,500 feet of a property line of a pre-existing dispensing organization unless that applicant is a social equity applicant. So now there's a dual backstop both at the state level and at the local level for that. We want to make sure that any annual renewals also include the social equity applicant information, but we certainly aren't going to burden those applicants with having to produce way more information than they already have to produce for the state. So we've simply asked them to provide us at the local level the same form that they're providing to the state so that we can confirm that information if there's any concern. And then in the language for transfer, and this would apply to all licenses, not just those being held by social equity applicants, that licenses are not eligible for sale or transfer without coming back before the city for a new license. And that would include the sale or transfer, that's anything that's structured as a membership purchase agreement, not just a straight asset transfer. So that is the big picture of what you have before you. And with that, I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Corporation Council, for bringing this forth. I felt it was necessary for us to get proactive as we are now fielding more license for marijuana dispensaries in our city, and we want to make sure that those who have the social equity designation are living up to the true spirit of why that was created in the first place at the state level. So I appreciate you adding this verbiage. Again, I think it's important that we start thinking about what do we want marijuana dispensaries to look like in Peoria based off of, and that's for a conversation for another day, but we know that we're going to start seeing more and more licenses now that the state is really starting to flesh out the applications that are coming forth. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I think it demonstrates, too, that we are practicing what we preach when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially participating in economics, that when we are having these designations, that these companies are operating within the true spirit of how the ordinance was designed at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarification, Council, the only changes to the ordinance are the ones that are underlined in this document,
Mayor.
correct? Okay. Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Corporation Council, for a very thorough and yet 30,000-foot view of what we're facing. But just one thing, you said that the state has about 185 applicants in this social. 3 of them would be in our. Did I hear that right? And I don't think it's ML. I was going to say MLS, but I know that's not the right term.
The original lottery that was supposed to be held almost 2 years ago at this point would have included a total of 185 social equity applicants. That may not just be dispensaries. That could include other businesses as well. Currently, as of last week, there are 7 that have been given to our BLS region. So that includes Stark, Marshall, Peoria, Woodford, and Tazewell counties.
Is that also the state police, or did they get rid of that? Originally, weren't they using the state police districts as the subdivision?
For the very first licenses that were issued, they were issued first to the medical cannabis facilities, had basically a first right to open an additional facility. The first round of dispensary licenses were issued by state police district, and now we're looking at BLS regions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're very welcome. I'm trying to get my head around 1,500 feet. Is that a block? Is that, I'm not an engineer or architect. I mean, how far is... Help me, somebody. Is it a football field? Councilman Kelly?
It's about 4 blocks.
4 blocks. Okay. All right. Seems reasonable. Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Valpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the legislation text says that there are 5 counties. Like the Peoria BLS region has 5 counties. And do we have any idea of how many are already there in these counties?
I don't know how many are cited in the other counties. I believe, I don't want to misspeak. I'm not sure how many, there's at least 1 in Tazewell County. There may be one in Woodford County. I'm not sure, however, if those were originally medical cannabis facilities. I believe at least the one in Tazewell County was a medical cannabis facility. The one in Woodford, I just don't remember. So we don't know where those will end up siting. They have 180 days from the time that their license is issued to actually establish a location, report back that information to the state of Illinois, and receive a non-conditional social equity applicant license.
So the conditional license issue date was on a month ago.
Yes.
It means they only have 60.
They have about 5 months left to secure their locations.
The other question I have, is, let's say one of the texts says that we don't know whether any of those businesses chose Peoria. What is the probability that, I just out of curiosity, I went into the census to see the population standpoint. And of all these things that are mentioned here, Tazewell County has more population, followed by Peoria. So meaning, it's my own opinion. What if 2 or 3 will want to, open up in Peoria? Are we ready for that? Like, let's say out of these 6, they have 5 more months to decide. And most of them wanted people to buy. That means the more population, I'm just trying to, expand on it to see where we are going. That's my first question. Second one is, we see there's a potential funding increase from license fee. How much is the licensing fee, and how much do we gain from that?
So I'm going to answer your questions, if that's okay, in the reverse order. So the licensing fee, once they've been up and running for more than a year, it's graduated. So it starts out at about $2,000 and then goes up to $10,000. I can tell you from the 2 dispensaries in town, we have not had complaints about the licensing fee. As far as where they'll end up siting, I think that some of you have probably received phone calls from either, real estate investors or brokers, or even the companies themselves who are looking for potential locations and sites. I know that economic development has yielded those phone calls. I know the city manager and myself have. I know Joe Doolin's office has. So we certainly see people looking to site in Peoria. I think what we've learned from the other dispensaries being located here in the last couple of years is that traffic counts matter to them. So they do want to generally locate along areas that have good traffic counts.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilman Allen, did you want to make a motion here?
I'd like to make a motion to receive and file.
Okay. Seconded by Councilmember Velpula. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-294 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Community Development with a request to concur with the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to receive and file a first reading of an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Unified Development Code relating to data centers.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to ask our Assistant Community Development Director, Leah Allison, to come up and explain this ordinance to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you can hear me, this is a proposed text amendment to be proactive in this newer type of use called a data center. So we've done quite a bit of research, and there's types of data centers that fall under this umbrella term, and it includes server farms, web hosting, cluster computing, cloud storage, and cryptocurrency mining. So those are all under this umbrella term of data center. And through our research, we found that data centers can have small footprints or very large footprints. They generally operate round the clock and use a lot of water and a lot of electricity, so a lot of utility consumption. They have very little on-site customers or even employees for that matter. And so we found that that type of those characteristics of this use is most appropriate as a special use in our industrial districts, so I-1, I-2, and I-3, and our institutional district, N1. All of this is as a principal use, so the primary use. Data centers that are accessory to principal uses that are permitted currently, or the principal use is itself permitted, and a data center might be accessory or ancillary to that principal use, that is not part of this regulation and would be allowed as part of that primary use. We do also include some performance standards which focus on the type of building that these may operate in, or the type of building that they wouldn't be allowed to operate in more specifically, which talks about your shipping containers, railroad cars. A lot of research, we found this to be some concerns of others, so we've incorporated that in the performance standards. And also a bit of concern or awareness of noise levels. So that's what our performance standards try to do, is regulate any and mitigate any noise that may affect neighboring properties. I think that's about it as a summary. Are there any questions that I can answer? Again, trying to be proactive. We don't have any of these currently operating in the city. We just want to be ready should we get the request.
I'll start off with a question, just because I've been in communication on, over the past year, numerous times with job or business developers from the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council, and they respond to these RFIs, I guess, requests for information about perhaps companies that want to set up shop in a certain type of industry, and one of them is data centers. And it seems that we haven't been well positioned in Peoria to be able to respond with companies that want to set up data centers in Peoria. One of those is location, but from what I understood, the other was the being able to provide the capacity to provide the energy input or output that is required for a data center. Can you speak to that at all?
I have that same understanding as well, that currently, and I'm not firsthand expert in this, but my understanding is that our current infrastructure of utility may not be adequate for a large-scale traditional big development center or data center, as you referenced. Right. I have that understanding as well. I don't know that specifically. So it may be that is what is prohibiting or
Sure. I mean, assuming this is approved tonight, I think that's something that we should explore, Mr. Manager, and see what is, what are there capacity limits by our local energy providers that are, prohibiting moving forward?
We certainly can, and we can have that conversation with Amber, and I do think that there is some utility limitations for larger scale data centers. When you think about like a data center for Amazon or a data center for Twitter or Facebook, where they're using a lot of energy and they have large facilities. They may not have a lot of employees, but they have a large facility that's operating in that location. That's something we can certainly have that conversation with. And then again, the challenge that we have is having that type of physical infrastructure, not only the utility side, but the building capacity. Do we have that kind of space in the community to put that in? Hopefully we'll get to that point with Gross Cell 2, that we might have some locations for that type of industrial development.
Good. Okay. I know Greater Peoria EDC will be happy to see this, but we want to remove all the barriers. Thank you. Councilmember Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First off, it's a great initiative, I would say, to open doors for innovation. But Mike, I just have a clarification question. So this is something to do with data management, and you have a big data coming in, data centers, right? So for running all these things, we need to have the internet capabilities. So we passed the ordinance today, but are we really prepared to have let's say, as Madam Mayor said, you'll have an RFI, and somebody will say, okay, we are interested to come down, and how much time or how prepared are we to kind of say that, okay, this is how much it takes for us to bring the necessary or needed data managing capabilities, like internet services or something like that.
I think it's the same conversation with the other utilities as well, is do we have the capacity available? And maybe right now we don't, but maybe in the future we could.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. No other questions? Can I get a motion to receive and file? Moved by Councilmember Graham, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Thank you very much. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at regular business. 22-295 is a communication from the City Manager and Interim Corporation Counsel with a request to approve a resolution requesting state legislators sponsor an amendment to the automated traffic law enforcement system.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, we'll turn the floor over to our Interim Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council recently had a discussion about our lack of ability in Peoria and Peoria County to use an automated red light traffic system. And the legal department did some research that we shared with you that based on our review of the legislative history, we couldn't determine any true basis that had been used to exclude the other counties that were not included or given the permissive authority, other than the fact that those were the 8 counties that had approached the legislature at the time and asked for authority to do so. So we prepared a resolution that we're asking that you consider that can be sent to our state legislators, asking that they sponsor an amendment to the automated traffic law enforcement system that would allow us the same permissive ability as the 8 other counties in Illinois that are allowed to use the red light cameras. Now, Councilman Grabe and I had an interesting conversation today, so I do want to point out a few pieces of information just to differentiate the red light cameras from other cameras, because we want to make sure that the public understands what we have the ability to currently do, who has the authority to use these, and then what we would actually be asking the legislature for. So red light cameras are distinct and different from speed light cameras. Right now, there are only 8 counties in Illinois that are authorized to use red light cameras, and what we would be asking is that we be included in an amendment to the state statute that would allow us to be the 9th county or the 9th municipality. Speed cameras can only be used in 3 instances in Illinois: by the state police, by the state tollway authorities, and by communities that have more than 1 million in population. So we can all guess which city that applies to. And then there is a separate and distinct statute that applies to railroad crossing cameras. And we would certainly have the authority to do that if we were having issues at any of our railroad crossings, and we would need to work with IDOT and the Illinois Commerce Commission for permission to do that. But again, think of them as being 3 distinct buckets of camera enforcement. One has to do with railroads, which we could request IDOT and the ICC's permission to use. One, we're asking the legislators for authority to use under an amendment for red light cameras. And then at this point, we haven't really determined anything with the speed enforcement cameras in the legislative history that would give us any recommendations or give us any teeth, so to speak, to make a recommendation that there be a change, since the city of Chicago is really the only municipality that's allowed to use that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. I think we need to, I know that this is just asking our legislators to amend the ordinance. We're not actually voting on red light cameras. We're voting on a resolution to request an amendment. But even so, I think we still all need a clear understanding of red light cameras. And I just wanted, Police Chief, if you would go to the podium and kind of give a little bit more clarification and any opinion that you have in terms of the implementation of red light cameras in Peoria.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As an opinion, I really don't have an exact opinion at this point because we are starting to do some research on the topic. Our traffic lieutenant visited with Davenport, Iowa, LeClaire, Cedar Rapids, and Aurora, Illinois, just to see how their technology is working. We've identified several companies and companies that provide this technology to see how they work, and just really trying to get some information from them. And so we're still in the research process of this. Since this last came up in the last council meeting, we decided, well, let's start doing some research. Let's see what this looks like. What would it look like for our city? Obviously, where would we put cameras of this nature, of this technology at, and what would the cost be? So we're still working through that. I definitely want to make sure, there's some manpower that is involved in this, because although you have those cameras, you still have to be able to go back, review the information that comes to those cameras, what are the error rates on them. So we're still working through that process. So I quite frankly don't have a yes or no. I like any technology that would help us, but I also want to make sure it's a technology that's going to be fair, that it's not going to cause any issues with our community members, undue stress on our community members, and on the police officers that have to monitor this. So we would have to have somebody assigned to it that's going to be reviewing it. Our adjudication process has to be up and working appropriately. So there's a lot of work in the background. It's not as simple as let's grab this stoplight camera, put it in the intersection. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. So we're still reviewing it, and once I have all that information, I can better make a decision on an opinion on how we think it would work for us.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And Manager, do you know when veto session opens up with the state legislature?
I believe it's the week before Thanksgiving is when they're going to be back in for veto session, so it's in mid-November. And then obviously we would incorporate this into our annual legislative program that we would put together for the first part of January to share with the legislators as well for the next legislative session that starts.
Right. So, I mean, this wouldn't happen. We have time is what I'm saying. Even if we deferred and didn't decide tonight, we have time because veto session doesn't start until November, and then that's the first opportunity, and then the second opportunity is in spring session.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, this is perhaps a little out of order, but you have similar, not ambivalence certainly, but when it comes to speed cameras.
I don't think the law allows us currently.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. If we were allowed to. I mean, in other words, I'm not asking for a recommendation, but do you have any further thoughts beyond your thoughts on the red light cameras regarding speed cameras, assuming they're legal?
Assuming that we're doing research on both of them. There's companies out there that do them. There's cities that have them. I believe in Iowa, they're using them. And so we're looking at all of that. Obviously, for us, we can't do it in Illinois unless something changes. So we're just kind of really looking more at the stoplight cameras. But we do have an ability to do some research on those other ones as well.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, you sound like you're heading for a going to ask for a deferral. And I'm just wondering what the council might think about including a request either with this request or a separate resolution, but similar regarding speed cameras to the legislature.
Okay. It's open for discussion. Councilmember Greb?
Well, first of all, in reference to deferring this, it has been deferred for at least 9 years that I've been a district councilman receiving complaints about speeding cars blowing stop signs in particular. We were told one meeting after the next with our state lawmakers when we put together the wish list. Were we not told this, Manager Urick? Can't do it. Only Chicagoland can do it. Every year, the answer was, Nyack, no, you can't do it. Peoria, you're different. Only the 8 counties in the Chicagoland area can do it. Well, happily, we have a corporation council who dug into this, and that's Corporation Council Kapuska. And lo and behold, we can do it. And there was nothing that the General Assembly did in 2006 when this was passed for those 8 counties that prohibited us from doing it. It was simply permissive for the 8 counties that asked for it. What we're asking our lawmakers to do come the fall session or whenever they see fit to do it is to give our constituents, who are also their constituents, the same weapons that can be used to deal with lawbreakers who drive recklessly and who have no regard whatsoever for some of our stoplights, who consider stoplights merely advisory. And I don't know, maybe I'm the only council person here who has heard about all the speeders in the city of Peoria. And you know what I'm reduced to telling them? Well, so far we don't even have a technology that other counties have in the Chicagoland area to assist in dealing with those who would choose to blow red lights, intentionally or unintentionally. We don't have that, and also we're so short-staffed, I can't tell you that we have the ability to do a lot of traffic enforcement for your neighborhood. And I'll bet you have neighborhoods too where there are all kinds of concerns about traffic enforcement. And we have basically a corporal's guard doing that. So when we get a technology that works, that can actually help us in one very small area, but an important area, like somebody that's going to blow a stoplight at Warren University, if we don't take advantage of getting that and providing that tool for our citizens, just as the people in the 8 counties in the Chicagoland have done, well, I think we're in a world of hurt, folks. The other thing that goes with this capacity, and I think it's important, because I've been researching this for some time, these red light cameras also can have artificial intelligence built into them. So that, for example, if it sees that there's a car careening down War Memorial Drive going, for example, west toward the intersection of, let's say, Sheridan and War Memorial Drive, and it sees it's going 80 miles per hour and there's no way that car is going to stop in time, that technology has the ability to keep the light green to get that errant motorist through and not let the people who would be going in the other directions think that they're safe to go when they get the green. It literally can calculate very precisely whether or not that light should be phased. I think that's a huge safety feature for some of our key intersections in town that are so heavily traveled. And I think War Memorial Drive, and I think Prospect, and I think Knoxville, and I think University, and I know there are many others. But I just don't know how we justify not doing everything we can to get more proactive traffic enforcement in this city. Chief, how successful have you been in collecting fines for those people who do get tickets? Where are we with that process?
That's a process we're working through as well with the city.
Well, tell us, is this an area where we're having difficulty?
It is an area where we're having some difficulty, and that's something that we have been having conversations about, and we're working through to have a sergeant work in the city hall to really monitor that and make sure that our adjudication process is working the way it should, have scheduled dates that are set. So those are conversations we've been having with corporate counsel.
So is it any surprise to you then that we have a lot of people who are speeding through our city thinking there might be no consequence?
We have a lot of people that speed to the city. That is accurate.
And that there might be little or no consequence. And I think that's where the plan that you have with this sergeant might dovetail neatly with this.
You know, if we move forward on this, yes, we have some things that we're able to do to make a smooth transition. So we're looking to see where this goes. I'd be happy to have red light cameras and whatever other technology would help us to curb the issues that we see.
And see, I think there's, and I'll just finish up.
Go ahead.
I think there's been a misunderstanding that we're going to have speed cameras that can clock somebody going 60 miles per hour down a given street where we have it and generate a ticket. This is not what the resolution is about. This is a very small aspect of traffic violation, but it is an extra tool that we have at some of these high-impact intersections where we have 25, 30,000 cars going through that intersection. And we can name them every single day. So I would be reluctant not to have this pass tonight, even though there may not be the ability for our state lawmakers to craft this or build this in any legislation until the fall session. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate Councilman Graham's leadership on this, and I also would like to say hats off to Corporation Counsel for digging back into 2006 and actually seeing what the intent of the state law was, because I remember being at those legislative breakfasts also being told that that's not, we can't do that. So to have the opportunity to have the, quote, permissive ability to do this, I think is important. And respectfully, I would say I think we should approve this tonight, because I don't want to have a lot of discussions about how we plan to implement it when we don't even have the ability to implement it yet. So by approving this request to our state legislators, I think I would say just put it on hold until they make that decision, because we have enough to talk about and enough issues to address that are pertinent for right now. So let's make the request, see if it happens in the fall veto session or if they punt until spring, which I would think would probably be the logical course. And then once we're granted that permissive ability, then let's have that full discussion with the community and see how to do it. Because I'm sure other council members have gotten emails about concerns about profiling and how these can be misused. Mm-hmm. And I really don't think that's a discussion we should have until we even have the ability to do it, you know? I think that's a very serious concern, and there's a lot of details that need to be vetted. But let's get that permissive ability request placed before we jump the gun and start limiting ourselves. And Councilman Kelly, I would say put the speed camera request on the spring agenda for the legislators. Don't muddy that with this, because I think that until the state makes it a call on that again, we're kind of spinning our wheels. So if you want to put that on the legislative agenda for next January, that would be appropriate. But I think right now the focus needs to be just simply asking to have the permissive ability to do this. And once we're granted that, then we have the full-blown discussion with community members.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're very welcome. I would suggest if this passes tonight, this is not a email with the resolution to our state reps, that it's a meeting held with some key stakeholders from around the horseshoe with our state reps, so that communication takes place properly and not just this is,
Great.
Okay. All right.
Move for the approval.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilman Redenbach actually echoed a lot of the sentiments that I was going to say, that I do feel that we should move forward so that way we can go into this exploratory stage and really seeing what this will look like if we, A, are granted, and then B, what vendor are we going to use, as Chief Echeverria said, what police officer or what staffing capabilities that we have. Essentially, if we get granted this, we're going to be doing a feasibility study to see if this is even sustainable within the city of Peoria. And then I think it's very necessary that we do bring in those key stakeholders to make sure, because I've received some emails just like everyone else as well too, and we want to make sure that we are not implementing something that can have detrimental effects on our constituents here in Peoria. This is a traffic safety concern, and that's what we want it to be, and we'll do everything in our power to make sure that is happening. So I do believe that we should move forward with this tonight in order for us to get to the next stage and look to potentially to see what the feasibility of implementing this is. Thank you.
Welcome. Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Several times in my time here, I voted no on things because they should be decided at the state and federal level, not here on our body. This time I'm voting yes because this should be decided here and not there. So it's not an indication of whether or not I would or would not support these cameras, but I think the decision should be ours and not Springfield's. So I will support. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Rodrigo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think that the request that you originally started with for the deferral, I think really went back to let's have the full conversation before we actually implement. And I appreciate that, and I agree with that also. I think what we have here tonight is the ask so that we can maybe start that. If this doesn't get passed at the state level, then we can't have those conversations. But in the vein of what you started with before, I think, too, that if this passes tonight, and I believe that we ought to be able to have the decision ability around this body to decide if we do it or if we don't do it, and if we do it, in what capacity it has. But I think the request has to be made before we actually go down that path. We could spend a lot of hours and a lot of time on something that we may not even have the ability to do. But I think, too, that as we go through this process, we want to heed your words as well so that we have a full conversation about the implementation, where these things are going to be placed. Is it equitable? Is it for a safety concern reason, which is really what I think what people have been talking about. So tonight, I think, for myself, it's let's get the request to the state, and then if this gets proposed, we have a lot of work to do before we bring this back.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I would ask council, as part of that discussion, if any additional research on how this is working in Chicago. Has there been any evaluation of red light cameras? That pilot or project there would be helpful, I think, when we meet with our state reps. Okay. Councilman?
I'd move to approve the resolution requesting our state legislatures sponsor the amendment to the automated traffic law enforcement system.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-296 is a communication from the city manager and interim corporation counsel with a request for the following. A, to adopt an ordinance amending the City of Peoria 2022 revised annual budget relating to the use of the Central Business TIF Fund balance to reimburse OSF Healthcare System and 124 Adams Property Holdings up to $1,500,000 for public improvements to the corners of Fulton Street, Adams Street, and Washington Street. And B, to approve the Second Amendment to the revised redevelopment agreement and parking deck lease with OSF Healthcare System and 124 Adams Property Holdings. And we will need two separate votes. And on the first one, it's a budget amendment, so we will need a 2/3 vote. So we will need 7 yeas to pass.
Okay. Any comments, Mr. Manager or Council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very quickly, as you know, we've already committed to reimbursing OSF up to $1.25 million for the improvement of Washington Street, which is on the backside of their headquarters. Their estimates came in higher. Imagine that with inflation where it's at. So this is just a request to bump that up to $1.5 million.
Okay.
Move to approve item A.
Okay. Seconded by Councilmember Seer. Any discussion? A discussion, Councilmember Recregal?
Just a comment, and I believe City Manager Yurk, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong in this. This is actually, I think, a lot of years overdue as well. I think if we go back 10 years, half of Washington got done in anticipation of this half eventually being done. And so this project is probably something that has been talked about for about 10 years.
And the county actually did that stretch of Washington Street that was redone. So we're now 3/4 of the way complete on this road. We just have the stretch between Fulton and Liberty to complete.
Good. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just, again, I just want to point out the fact that this is a $127 million project on that block. And we owe big thanks to the Sisters of OSF for their commitment to downtown. And I work just a block from there, so I see that building every day, and what a testimony to the rise of downtown Peoria. So I'm encouraged, and I just want to say again to the sisters and the OSF leadership, thank you for that commitment.
Absolutely. We're voting on item A. Please cast your ballots. And passes unanimously. Councilmember Euler?
Move to approve item B.
Seconded by Councilmember Recregal. Any discussion? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously.
We are at unfinished business. We do not have any items listed, but does council have any unfinished business?
Yep. No, you can proceed.
Then we are on to new business.
Is there any new business? Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If it's not out of order, I'd like to ask Councilman Riggenbach or anyone else on the council what the problem would be in putting forward another resolution on, regarding speed cameras. I'm not sure I understood your objection to that.
Let's have council. Can you respond to that, please, if Councilmember Kelly wanted to move forward with a different resolution?
No.
Not a different resolution?
No, my request was to hear Councilman Riggenbach's objection to it. I would like to do that, but I'd like to hear his objection because I'm not sure I understood it.
What I heard him say, and you can clarify, was that not to mix that with this red light camera, that if you wanted to pursue that separately this spring, with this spring's session, state legislature session, that you could do that separately, but not to kind of.
That was part
mix
of
it
my confusion, because I don't think there's any chance of having this approved in veto session, at least not according to their rules, which they break all the time. But so I think that the resolution we pass tonight will be presented to them in the spring in our legislative session.
That's very possible.
Yes, which means what? We have to wait another year so it doesn't get confusing, or what?
Do you want to
That's
clarify,
why
Councilmember Riggenbach, can you clarify?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the urgency, if you will, about the red light camera was because we've been talking about this ad nauseum, and Corporation Council discovered through their diligence what the 2006 act from the state legislature actually intended, which was something different from what we had been led to believe in the past. So I think there's an urgency to that, because we want to get that in front of them while it's fresh in our mind, while everybody's well in tune. I can't recall in the years I've been on council that we've made appeals to our legislators. We have that very well-defined process every January when we call them together for the breakfast with the county and the health department, that we review our wish list of projects and changes. So I think that's the appropriate time to do it. And since that wouldn't just be a simple amendment to an existing state ordinance, that would be creating a whole new thing. So that would be less likely, in my opinion, to be addressed in the veto session. That would be something that would want to follow the normal course of a legislative process during the spring session. So I think you also risk the danger, in my opinion, that you're going to, these are very sensitive topics that we need to be attuned with, and Councilman Allen outlined some of those potential concerns, and the mayor as well. So let's not cross those at this time. If it ends up they're both presented again in January, so be it, but at least we'll have had the opportunity to address this one squarely, independently, and unbiasedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Riggenbach. I respectfully disagree, but I will not put forward a new resolution. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're very welcome. Councilmember Graham?
First of all, I think there are some erroneous ideas out there as it relates to enforcement here. It is fact that the National Transportation Safety Board has documented a huge spike in traffic accidents post-COVID and disproportionately impacting communities of color with injuries and deaths. Okay? So let's just take that off the table. Also, Corporation Counsel, my esteemed colleague John Kelly, who has helped move this red light thing along, thank you, probably didn't have the benefit of the email that you sent me today. Can you just briefly go over that so he understands why we're not biting right now, but that doesn't mean we couldn't or shouldn't later. Can you repeat that? You may have gone over just parts of it, but I don't think we were focusing just on red light camera only, linear.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. As we discussed, for speed cameras, they're only allowed in 3 situations. The Illinois State Police can use them, the Illinois Toll Highway Authority, the Illinois Highway Toll Authority can use them, and Chicago can use them. Unlike the research that we found looking into the legislative history of the red light cameras, there are no other municipalities outside of Chicago that are allowed to use speed cameras. So it may very well take some consensus building at the Illinois Municipal League or a mayor's caucus, because it's quite unlikely that the city of Chicago and the city of Peoria, Illinois would be the only two cities identified in this statute to use speed cameras. So I suspect our legislators would also need some time to build consensus with other communities, and perhaps it's the same 8 counties in those communities that are allowed to use the red light cameras. Perhaps it's, based on something else, just straight population. But from a timing and a strategy perspective with how the bills are introduced, I think that the red light cameras are much more likely to go forward in a veto session when, as Councilman Riggenbach pointed out, it's the insertion of one word into a state act versus basically rewriting an entire section.
So in other words, Councilor Kelly, this may be, we're on the road to a larger destination, but we first have to reach the first destination. And once we get there, then we'll see what we can do with the other. So appreciate everything you've done to get us this far, very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Any other new business? Okay, Madam Clerk.
We are at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council.
We have one card, Mr. Charles King.
Hello. Before I really say anything, I want to thank you all for being here. I recognize that the important work of municipal government really exemplifies what government's about.
Can you speak up a little bit, Mr. King?
Sure. My name is Charles King. I've been stuck in the mental health system for over a decade. Nothing has worked. I've been in therapy. I've been medicated. The therapy was ineffective. The wide variety of meds just didn't work. Does anyone know someone like that who's been stuck in the mental health system for years? Just curious. No? Seems like I'm uniquely positioned to talk about it then. Well, the first medication I was ever given back in 2011 was Seroquel, and it nearly killed me. It put me in hospital, nearly a heart attack. After years of searching for an effective treatment, driven out of pure desperation, I finally found a medicine that's highly effective with none of the side effects that all too often accompany more conventional medications. I'm here to forcefully advocate for the decriminalization of this medicine, psilocybin. Simply put, what so-called magic mushrooms do is give you a novel way of looking at the world, and this allows one, for instance, to remember what life felt like before trauma. This is a common sense mental health undertaking. There is nothing controversial about this. The 70s era's policies that stifled 60s research put us back. And until 2000, we didn't have any research. Johns Hopkins is leading the way, and I just emailed all of you a lot of citations, lots of papers, lots of research. You have no excuse of ignorance. Unfortunately, this stigma is a problem, and it's, I would say, probably the #1 issue that gets in the way of educating the public. People who aren't accustomed to this are fearful of it. It's natural. But the studies, the science, it's clear. You know, while I was writing this, I was thinking a lot about John Locke. So I just want to share 3 quotes. It comes from his essay concerning human understanding, if you're familiar with it. On error. It is one thing to show a man that he is in error, and another to put him in possession of the truth. On judgment. He that judges without informing himself to the utmost that he is capable cannot acquit himself of judging amiss. And on opinion. New opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any other reason, but they are not already common. Medical science is extremely promising regarding treatment of conditions such as PTSD, anxiety disorders, addiction recovery, helping terminal patients trying to cope with grief. The doctor might know about that as an oncologist. The research is compelling. The science speaks for itself, and these outdated policies should be adapted to suit the needs of our present society, consistent with what the data has to say about this medicine. You can ask the good doctor about this, but there is promising evidence that psilocybin use is conducive to an environment in the brain which induces neurogenesis. Now, I'm not going to plainly say what that is because of how incredible that claim is, but it's worth looking into, truly. Here are some quick bullet points on the progress being made in the medical community led by Johns Hopkins. Every claim is cited. Magic mushrooms help longtime smokers quit. Psilocybin eases existential anxiety in people with life-threatening cancer. Reclassification recommended for psilocybin. They were pushing for psilocybin to go to Schedule 4, but it only made it to 2. Schedule 1 is a drug with no known medical application. This is the only one that has worked for me. It's absurd, plainly. There is a statewide measure to push for decriminalization, but I am so desperate that I'm here. I can't legally obtain this. It's the only thing that's worked for me. 10 years, therapy, meds. If you do not act, if you do not consider discussing this, you're condemning me to a waking nightmare every day. And all I ask is that you consider it. Engage me in email, Zoom, afford me more time than the 8 seconds I have left because this is way too complicated a subject to break down, but please be open-minded. It could help so many. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. King. Madam Clerk?
We have an executive session.
Counsel?
Madam Mayor, we need an executive pursuant to 5 ILCS 120, 2C1, the appointment or employment of a specific employee, 2C11, pending litigation, and 2C21 to discuss closed session minutes.
Motion to go into executive, moved by Councilmember Jackson, seconded by Councilmember Velpula. Cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Can I get a motion to close? Moved by Councilmember Ruckriegel, seconded by Councilmember Sear. Please cast your ballots. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your service.